Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Satsang. Let's make some silence first. Silence. Keep silence undisturbed. Remove importance from all thoughts that may appear. They do not interest. They are insignificant, unexistent. Embrace silence. Surrender to silence. Stay there. Okay, for those who don't know, we use WhatsApp as a means of communication. You can send your questions, they will come directly to me. It is easier because if you have something else to ask, then I can continue answering. It's more dynamic. So in the old days, there was an expression that said that the spiritual path, the path of awakening, is a narrow path. And it's simple why it is a narrow path, because there wasn't so many crossing it. No need to be big, just a. But these days, it is not just a big road, it is a big highway with several tracks that a lot of people can go through. So it seems, so it is being observed. But that doesn't really quite stand. The path is still narrow and it's becoming even more narrow. Lesser people are there. But this narrow thing is not about, that was just a kind of a joke. It's not about uh, the number of people that are going through, but about the qualifications of seekers. And the more the seekers become weakened, dependent, the more narrow it becomes because more tests are there, more obstacles. And these obstacles are seen in yourself. You see, awakening, self realization, all these things have become mainstream language, a means for a better life. So they say, the experts, the smiling ones. And just because the majority of seekers are um, agreeing on something, it doesn't make it right, it doesn't make it true, and it doesn't bring any life, any real life to the process. You have what you need, and that is your factual experience. That's it. Your factual experience of your spiritual path. So today I will talk a little bit about one of the pillars of the quest for truth, and that is renunciation. And yes, I know all these theories, because they're nothing but theories, about nothing to renunciate, and if I'm everything, what is there to renunciate? If not the body, why should I renunciate the bodily possessions? And all this blah 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 blah. And usually, and this comes from those who are the most dependent on these things. And the thing is, it's not something which is divinely required. It is something that is humanly required. Because if it's being an obstacle, if your world is completely entangled by those things, you will not move forward. It is simple. And renunciation qualifies, makes it possible. Because there are dimensions in the process of freedom, in your personal experience, uh, things that have to be lived. that the mainstream spiritual ethics will not bring. It can help you to move a little bit from in safety, uh, but who is looking for safety? There is some dimensions of strength lying there dormant in each and every one of you. And these strengths, they can only be reached in certain circumstances. Comforts and modern life has been weakening the mind, the seeker's mind. They have become more fragile, more dependent. We are living in a world where these mental crises, these mental medicines, doctors, and all of these things have increased 1,000-fold because the minds, at generally speaking, have become more weakened. Comfort plays a big role in this because it has the good aspects that you know, but these aspects, these bad aspects of making you weak, this is much more relevant because in times that you need to be strong and intense, then you'll be broken. So renunciation has been and will always be one of the pillars of the quest for truth. And like I usually say, and I will repeat again, there are some things that you can see that it is better to give it up using your reasoning. But there are other things that uh, it's not just about you. It has to come to you. Uh, Direct guidance or indirect guidance, it has to come to you, and it will. If you're working seriously, you will see, for example, if you start a meditation practice, some things will have to be renunciated so that that meditation can begin. More things will have to be renunciated for meditation to continue. And that is just an example. And eventually, there will be things that you don't perceive the need for it, or you don't perceive that it will be possible if it would be asked for. But some seekers will have to go through this, through renunciation of these strong uh, harbors where they are cling to. And it can be a lot of things. It can be a family, it can be possessions, it can be uh, in that family, it can be very close ones like parents, sons, uh, spouses. It can be a lot of things. And there are those things that they are not, uh, that you do not dare to touch. But for example, if you're following the path of, how should I call it? what we've been talking about, these non-dual paths, neo-Advaitic and all of that. And if you're sincere, eventually there cannot be any gray areas. You cannot look at some parts that are completely unreal and other parts that you protect as real and important, that you have to strive to protect. It will have, your on-look will have to go all the way through. And if you look at stories, you will see that through millennium, saints and sages have gone through these things. Some had to leave their homes. Some had to leave all they had. It is a very important part of the spiritual path. And the more fragilities are there, the more these things come, because without these fragilities, there won't be a need for that. So these dependencies, all of these things, they are about an idea that you are that body-mind complex, and the idea that you have all those needs and you cannot go by without them. Because for the seeker of truth, the one who is already cleared, who has gone beyond these weaknesses, there's nothing to renounce really. If he has to compare truth or illusion, it is clear. So he's not turning his back to the world, just going towards truth. So he's not renouncing anything. Those who have to make renunciations is the ones that are trying to move towards truth, but still clinging on their own delusions. And there are a lot of theories to protect, for seekers to protect themselves against these concepts. That is that, why would God make me leave these things? It's not possible. And so on, and so on, and so on. But you could ask also, why should God allow me to continue with this vision of myself living in ignorance and suffering? The same as you look at the doctor and there is something stuck inside your thigh, bringing you pain, infection, probably death. But by removing that, it will cause pain. No anesthetics there, no anesthesia possible. So what will be the act of compassion? Leave it there, not causing more pain, but allowing death and destruction to come, or to take it out. What is really compassion? But even that, it doesn't matter. It's quite interesting because these days it is a fact, common concept that everything is divine, that you are God, and all these things. But it's interesting when we speak about renunciation, for example, sacrifices and all of that, you become very small. You're just godlike when we are not talking about these things. Sometimes, most of the times, there is a lot of reasons why certain things come to you, certain requests of renunciation. And the majority of times you are not ready to understand them, to see them. If you were, what would be the point? And this brings a lot of pain and suffering. And eventually, if the desire is for liberation is sincere, you will go through. And there are certain situations when it involves loved ones and all of these things that seekers care with themselves, a load of guilt for a lot of time. And this is mistaken, but it is good. It's a good sign that it is there because the human part is okay. Because there are a lot of seekers also that sacrifice whatever, but it's not really a sacrifice because it is for greed. They are going for truth in a greedy way. So they are not really sacrificed. They are making a financial exchange. And that brings different lessons that are needed to be learned. But this is not the issue today. For the majority of times, as these seekers make these sacrifices that are coming to them, they become full of guilt. And yes, sometimes there is suffering that is caused um, because of these actions. And this will be repaid with suffering also from the part of the seeker. Because as he is really sacrificing, pain intense will be there. But eventually, if he trusts, if he continues down the road that is being pointed, then things will become clear. He will understand. And sometimes, in the seeker's reality, it becomes almost impossible to find his path because you have your own. And sometimes the only way is through these storms that completely wipes out all traces of your civilization. So sometimes you need an apocalypse in your life. And that sets the track for a new unseen, because it wouldn't fit in your reality, a new direction. And for those ones that are there in that position, not many reach this level of intensity in their spiritual quest. This means that there is real potential for awakening. And this becomes very lonely because they are judged uh, by the worldly community. They are judged by the spiritual community. They are judged by everyone. You see? You have two, two big uh, episodes, let's call it like this, episodes in your life. There's this major rupture uh, as you try to become a seeker of truth, because if you're living in a worldly environment, those who are around you will start to judge you, to try to bring you back to the same level of understanding that they are, because you start to become different. And different, it doesn't matter, it is bad, it is threatening, it is to this uh, social interactions. People have a tendency, a need to surround themselves by those who think the same way, because this gives them safety, because they really don't know anything about anything. So having those who can confirm their beliefs, it is very important. So there's this big birth from the worldly life to the spiritual life. And eventually, after some struggle, you start to establish yourself into a spiritual community, more or less. Not everybody, but more or less the majority. And this goes on quite some time, depending. And there will be a second rupture, and that is when your spiritual path becomes really very intense. The spiritual community will also not understand it, and they will go against it with all their wisdoms and knowledges and all these things to try to stop you. For the same reasons that your family, your friends from your worldly life did. For the same reasons, nothing different. But eventually, it is these few ones that bring back the world and give to the others. It is like this. They are condemned in their own time and then worshipped in the future. For others, they become a reference. It is like this. It always has been like this. And there's nothing that can be said really when the seeker is facing a situation where he has to give up of something which is very important to him, vital, something that others are not understanding and condemning, that goes against moral ethics and all of these things, because ethics vary a lot if they come from the eyes of a worldly person, of a spiritual person, and it's all relative. This is a very lonely moment, and this is where the it will be seen where the trust lies. And if you're standing in front of this, it doesn't matter what logic says, what ethics says, what the others are saying, because if you look, you will find proofs that none of that is need of doing. You will also find proofs that these things are needed to be done. But eventually, nothing of this matters because it is about your own weaknesses. Either you go through them or not. If you go through them, you will grow. If you don't, you'll shrink. It is more or less like this. Because if you don't move forward, you're moving backwards. No one stops. So if you're in that situation, in that moment, it means, against all odds that you can perceive, that it is possible. And that there is a purpose. But these words, they will not be important, useful, because fears are not rational. They're not. Limited vision, it doesn't become clear because of directions or guidance. Only you going through the tests, the difficulties, only by going through them, you have the possibility to grow. Because renunciation is the start of a new chapter. It's not the end, it is the start. It may be the end of something worldly, but that is unimportant in spiritual terms. It is the start. It's like turning the oven. But okay, the oven is turned, but now you have to put the things inside and let it roast. And those of you who have been hiding behind these uh, mainstream spiritual concepts, you're not being smart because you're depriving yourself from the biggest glories. So it's not really that smart. And maybe now these words make no sense. It's just, nonsense. But let's see in 10 years' time. Because time does fly. And as time is running through your fingers, well, perspective tends to change. Okay, so there was some questions here previously. In India, from someone from India. Uh, Hello, Sriman Narayana, sir. How are you? Can you tell me how can I enter into spirituality, and how should I start meditation for better life? My friend, this is not something that I can really do because this is not what I talk about. Better life, and you're living in India. Hmm? Uh, it's the land where the majority of the trunks of gold of spirituality are buried. And you're trying to get something which is worthless, better life. Well, it is for a better life because if we're talking about liberation, that is the best life. And the quest for it, from the human perspective, is the only thing that makes sense. The only endeavor that has meaning, purpose, and all of this. The rest is just waste of time. But this better life usually has a different connotation. So my advice for you, uh, for a better life, is to see the minds, to read the stories of the saints and sages of your country and see where they are pointing. And then, yes, then you can start meditation. But before, clarify that thing about this better life, the meaning of a better life. As for meditation, there is a video that I made about meditation, that I talk about meditation. You can watch that video, and if you have more doubts, you can ask. If you're starting, and I'm watching here your questions, and if you're starting your spiritual path, it is not clear from what you're writing, but it seems that you're just still questioning about it and trying to understand what it is. It is more easy because it's not possible to summarize it in 2 minutes or 5 minutes. But there is in the YouTube channel, there is this series of 14 videos, which is Igniting the Sacred Fires. Igniting the Sacred Fires is a series of 14 videos that I did talking about the spiritual path. It starts with the seeker of truth. You're asking here, what is the mindset of a spiritual person? But this is not what I'm talking about here. I have to make a differentiation between a spiritual person and a seeker of truth. Because spiritual person is becoming the new normal. People are tending to become more spiritualized. They have the knowledge of spirituality. They are trying, some are trying to become better persons, and all of this, okay. But I'm talking about seekers of truth, not the ones that they are on a different path, more intense, completely dedicated, and so if you want to know a little bit about this, then if you have time, watch those videos in the way they present themselves. That sequence has a logic of its own. And then if you have doubts, you can send and I will gladly uh, answer to you. You're asking also, Lord Narayan is said to be like us, but why did he, I don't know, why do we call him as supreme? Is it this? We are also like him, but why we don't have character like him? Well, if you go through all these adventures of awakening, then eventually you'll realize that there is no difference whatsoever between one thing and the other. But these are just words now, and words, they may point towards somewhere, but they are not really that relevant. Just the pointing. First, find out who you are, then let's see if these questions hold. They won't. Okay, Mr. Gene, Mr. I think it is Mr. Gene Karen. Well, hello. My question is simple, and I believe that I'm a seeker of truth too. Yes, uh, like they say, everyone is a seeker of truth, potentially. What brings that is um, the decisions that you make. I'm wondering how Sriman did become awake and having a wife and a life as it is. Because I'm a 61 and I have a wife, a job, a mortgage, a bunch of friends that I'm losing because they do not believe in my quest, and I'm a friend of Ramana Maharshi. But I started to practice, practice your meditation, since some time now, and I got the silence and deepness better. Okay, my friend. So, how did it happen? Well, like I said in the previous video, and I will continue to say, I don't usually talk about myself for different reasons. which I will not be enumerating now. But I will give you a glimpse because there's this idea that um, there is a possibility of doing things and things staying together. But just because you are watching this, it doesn't mean that you're understanding what this means, just so to say. But okay, let's go to this. Everything is possible and in every way is possible. But usually it is this principle that you are observing here. Hmm? So, and I have a bunch of friends that I'm losing because they do not believe in my quest. So these friends, they represent uh, an exterior part of your important circle concerning people. Hmm? So, and you're losing them. I'm sure that some are easier to lose than others. The more the intense the friendship, the more difficult it becomes. But it is like this: as you intensify and deepen your practice, you tend to lose that which was precious to you for the wrong reasons. And if you don't lose it, you will have to lose it 1,000 times. Or that means you'll have to live that loss, you'll have to be prepared to lose it 1,000 times. And usually in relationships, that's what tends to happen. So enlightenment in a family environment, usually it's not that romantic as it seems to make it possible, because people tend to think, oh, I will do this and I will keep everything together, it will be nice and shanti and all of this, but usually that is not the case for several reasons. One of it is the seeker of truth usually, well, at your age, maybe it's not the case, but usually is difficult temper because he has a lot of uh, uncertainties in his life. Usually is in constant convulsion, and especially with spiritual practices. And it's very interesting because people tend to say, oh, but you're practicing meditation and you're so nervous. Hmm? Shouldn't be you be quiet? Yeah, that's usually happens, but no, before the calm and the peace comes the storm, because the storm is lying in everyone. So storm has to come out, then peace be there. So this romantic idea that things uh, can go in a smooth way and still continue, that's not really the case. And my friend, let me tell you just this, I know what I'm talking about. Because you have to tend, see, relationship, you have to take care, you have to give it importance, because if you don't, it breaks, it dissolves, it loses its purpose more or less. Usually it is like this. So these processes lived in a family environment, they tend to become very intense and sometimes they leave wounds, very difficult wounds that will take uh, two very special people to deal with them and to grow with them. And that is completely very difficult. And I was going to say impossible, but nothing is impossible. But okay, very difficult. So usually these stories, they don't usually end up living happily ever after. It's not really the case. So if love is there, it will continue and maintain and will survive. If things are not in the proper place, it won't. But if you want to intensify your work, you cannot hold on yourself to these things because you will have to stop giving importance. You will have to cut these importances. And by doing that, the other one will instinctively react and start to wanting to regain. what was there previously, and this is normal, and there's no way to tell where this can go. But surely you will have to be prepared to live that separation, to lose that which is dear to you again and again and again. Because if that is going to break or to stay, that is one thing that has nothing to do with that which you're living inside of you. Because with your dependencies, with your need for security and all of that, as you start cutting the importance of it, as you start going more within, then clashes will become inevitable. And then you have to hold your grounds to not go back and give it importance again. This is one of the situations that I was talking about previously, these renunciations. And the renunciation, it is sometimes it is an outer thing that you need to do because, well, it is the only way, but sometimes it is an inner experience, but still it has to be lived. So being there, going within, it is inevitable that clashes will happen. Or your relationship is so bad, that for you to go within, it will be peace for the other. So this can happen also. And this is will be good. But usually it's not the case. There's not a way that works because this is about your needs, your attachments, your difficulties, and all of this. This is what it's all about. So eventually, that which you will have to go through is according to these uh, fragilities, inner fragilities, dependencies, wrong visions, and all of this. Everything has to be corrected. So, intensifying your practices, going more within, it is the path. And that which has to stay will stay. That has to go, let it go. And all changes that are made with the purpose of truth, with the right motivations, they are always and always for the better. Sometimes this is not seen in the beginning, but eventually, with time, it becomes clear. So, trusting love, for example, is also about this because if the relationship is love based, then it will endure if it has to endure. But it is the importance that you are giving to this that needs to change, that needs to dissolve. And if it is real love, it will continue. If it isn't, it will go away. So if you're seeing it going away, well, you have your answer. If it's still sticking around, well, you have your answer. This usually takes time to see. But just because you are observing something and uh, thinking that, oh, so this has happened like this and like that, it doesn't really make sense. And usually are things are always surprising, and this would be also surprising. But this is the thing. If you are a seeker of truth, this is what you will push through against whatever and whatever it takes. and what has to stay stays, what has to go goes, and sometimes it is the seeker that needs to move. It is like this, and well, it is according to your personal needs, not what you think you need, but what you really need. Because what you think you need, it's about self-preservation, it's about maintenance of illusion, and what you really need will be brought to you according to what is possible for you to receive, and not what you think is possible for you to receive. And you have to be very attentive, because sometimes things come in a subtle way, and only an attentive mind, the one who is waiting for guidance, only that one can see. Okay, so next satsang will be Sunday, 9 a.m. UTC minus 3. Till then, intensify your practices, reflect, make it real for you. Make it real. Okay.